Hello, I'm Sky Matsuhashi, founder of SmartPokerStudy.com, the place for poker players who are always striving to be better today than they were yesterday. Poker people, in case you missed it, go back and listen to episode 8, where I taught you how to ingrain new skills into your poker repertoire in a smart, systematic way by using focus sessions. Hey, poker people, Merry Friday and a happy Q&A to ya. You know, I decided to do these types of episodes because I really wanted to help the listeners, and this was the best way for me to find out what you need help with. I've been receiving lots of questions lately, and not only does it give me something to talk about here on the podcast, but it's also given me some great ideas for future videos, future articles, and, future podcasts as well. So thanks much, and keep sending them in. Okay, on to the show. We've got 4 questions today, and 2 of them are hand history questions. This is great, as I've been restudying Andrew Brokos' classifications for ranging opponents. I first learned about these in his first set of Tournament Poker Edge videos that he made a while back now. I started using them for a while, but kind of drifted away from them, and I think my game would be much improved if I had stuck with them. Well, here's my chance to get back to them and to teach you what I've learned from that classification system that he uses. And speaking of hand ranging, Andrew Brokos' system is great, and I also recently got the hand reading lab from SplitSuit, and holy cow, there's so much here, and I'm still just partially into it. I'll give you a review eventually, and maybe even do something like I did with the course, and do an extended series of episodes or podcasts dedicated to the hand reading lab. I'll keep you posted on that, and it's a great course so far, and SplitSuit is an awesome teacher. So if you want to improve your hand reading, you've got 2 different options that I'm recommending right now. It's Andrew Brokos' hand ranging videos through Tournament Poker Edge, and then the hand reading lab from SplitSuit as well. And for everything I discuss here, it'll be in the show notes for this episode, which you can find and follow along at smartpokerstudy.com/pod41. Alrighty, so this first question comes from Mrs. Bravlovsky.
This just isn't like you, Stanley. What did my son say, Mr. Mackey? Did he say the S word?
No, it was worse than that.
The F word?
Well, here's a short list of the things they've been saying. Okay.
Oh, dear God. What the heck is a rim job?
Wow. Thanks for that question, Mrs. Bravlovsky. Adam Carolla recently answered this question in a podcast. He said that it says a whole lot about someone who knows what rim jobs or felching is. So you're better off just saying you don't know what these are and just playing it off like you're unawares. So actually, Mrs. Bravlovsky, I have no idea what a rim job is. Is that like when you take your car in for new tires and rims? That's a new one for me. That's something I'll have to Google later on. But thank you very much for that question. Hey, Nongman. So, question number 2. Actually, and before we get to the first hand history, let me tell you a little bit about Andrew Brokos' classifications. If you don't know who Andrew is, he's one of the brilliant poker minds behind the Thinking Poker podcast, which he hosts with Nate Mavis. I really recommend you checking out that podcast as well. Andrew is a poker pro, a coach, a video maker, and a self-proclaimed nit when it comes to spending money off the felt. He seems like a really cool guy, and when he became a coach at Tournament Poker Edge, he created a 4-part video series all about hand ranging and how he goes about doing it. He classifies his opponent's range into 3 categories and narrows their range as the hand progresses down the streets. The 3 categories are Monster, Marginal, and Draws or Air. So for the monster category, these are very good hands that can expect substantial action from worse hands. They are worth multiple bets and often the entire stack. Opponents are trying to get your chips when they have a monster hand. And a marginal hand is their good hands that can win at showdown in small pots, but can only beat bluffs in the bigger pots. Opponents often try to keep the pot small and win at showdown. They also try to push you off of your draws. You want to look for betting patterns in your opponents. Sometimes you'll encounter opponents who only bet small with marginal hands and big with monsters. And the last category is draws or air. And weak hands, these are weak hands that are unlikely to win at showdown unimproved. These are the most common hands unless your opponents only start with strong hands, like if they're a nitty player who plays 10% of hands and raises 8. No matter what, they're going to have most likely a pocket pair or two good overcards. So they will most likely fold at some point if they have these draws or air, but bluffs can often be made with these. They can be played aggressively if given the opportunity. So those are the three categories that Andrew Brokos breaks his opponent's hands down as. And let's dive into that through this first hand. It comes from LTU Maximus. This is a cash table at 10 NL, and you can actually follow along in the show notes with this hand. I got the replayer right there for you. But LTU Maximus says, hello, I had a situation last night. Villain's stats are from 223 hands. His VPIP is 19. Pre-flop raise is 13. His 3-bet percentage is 1.2, and his fold to 3-bet is 87%. Alrighty, so it's pretty obvious that this guy is a very taggy, tight, aggressive player, and only 3-bets for value. You know, when your 3-bet is at 1.2%, he's 3-betting aces and kings. That's just about it. Maybe queens occasionally, you know, when he's in position, kind of a thing. But thank you very much for this hand, LTU Maximus. So everybody follow along in the show notes. But I will do my best to, verbalize the hand as it goes right here. So pre-flop, it's a 10 NL game, 117 BBs effective, and we cover our opponent. There's 8 players dealt into the hand. We have King Queen offsuit on the button. It's folded to the cutoff, who makes a less than 3 big blind open. This is the villain in the hand. We 3-bet to just over 3x, or about 9 BBs, and he decides to call. So we're heads up to the flop and in position. So this guy, like I had already said, is a taggy player with stats at 19-13 and a very high fold to 3-bet. So I really like your 3-bet bluff here. The guy folds 87% of the time. Your bet is going to work most of the time. You know, I would have liked to have seen an ace in your hand, as this would put less aces in his range, so he'd be defending less often than the 87% or than the 13%, you know. But folding to 87% makes this a profitable play, so I don't fault you. I commend you for that, actually. Your 3-bet only had to work 46% of the time to be profitable, so that's great. As an initial range for the villain, before we see the flop, before we see any more action, we're looking at jacks or worse, suited aces, broadways, both offsuit and suited hands is what I would say. So he continues to 3-bets only 13% of the time usually, and that's a pretty small range. He's also out of position right now, and that can influence him to be on the tighter side. So I would choose, you know, a lot of those hands I just mentioned, but probably more of the suited variety when it comes to the broadways, and most pairs, because he's probably looking to flop a set on you. So the flop comes down, or actually before it comes, we have 19 BBs in the pot, 19 big blinds, and it comes out 10-3 deuce with 2 hearts. So remember, we've got the king queen with the king of hearts. So we've got 2 overcards with a backdoor king high flush draw and a backdoor straight draw. The villain checks and we bet 11 BBs, which is about 60% of the pot, and the villain calls. So I really like making the c-bet, as you've still got some equity in the pot, and any king, queen, jack, or 9 gives you either top pair or additional outs, as does any heart. You know, you pick up a flush draw if a heart comes on the turn. But I'm not really fond of the sizing that you use. The sizing that you use put the pot at exactly, not a penny over, but exactly at 30 big blinds. And now, I've often found that careful sizing like this means my opponent, he did some math in the hand, in his head, and he wants the amount to scare me into folding. Like when you see that exactly $3 in the pot, 30 BBs exactly, it could scare some opponents. That's kind of what I take that kind of bet sizing to mean. And if it seems that the amount that your opponent bets is more random and is closer to a standard percentage like half pot or 2/3 or 3/4 pot, these can be either value or bluffs. So I generally tend to hit one of these standard buttons so I don't choreograph my intentions. So now that he's called the flop out of position, let's put him on some ranges. Looking at the pre-flop range that I assigned, let's put him on some of these monsters here. The only monsters that he has are sets, of course, at this point. The marginal hands, well, any board pair and under pairs like 6s through 9s might call one street due to that smaller sizing. And callers probably have some sort of flush draw or backdoor draw as well. And for draws and air, he could possibly have 2 overs like king jack or ace king or ace queen or king queen like you have, and those would call one street, especially if it was a good heart that they had along with their 2 overs. And also the flush draws would call. So if he had 2 hearts and it could be, 10 jack suited, Actually, there's 10 on the flop. So like, Jack Queen suited, that kind of stuff would call as well. And his call, now that we're approaching the turn now, his call made the pot 41 big blinds on the turn. We've got about 100 big blinds behind. The turn comes the 9 of spades. So the board reads 10, 3, deuce, 9, 2 hearts, and 2 spades. So our backdoor flush draw is out because we didn't get a heart, but now we've picked up a gut shot with the 9. We need a jack to make a straight or a king or queen for top pair. So we've got 10 outs on the turn, which will hit about 20% of the time. And the villain checks, so we bet exactly 1/2 pot and he calls. Now, it's really too bad that this turn card wasn't the 9 of hearts for additional flush draw equity. If it were, I'd be good with the bet. But in this case, we're looking for only 10 outs on the river, so we can just check behind here and see it for free. We don't want to face a check raise in this spot and be blown off of our equity. Plus, the 9 itself doesn't really help our range too much from his perspective. He called the flop on a 10 high board, and he'll probably call on the turn. Being a 9, it's a lower card. It doesn't change the board much at all. Plus, the smaller bet sizing is indicative of a weaker hand. We went from a 60% bet on the flop to a 50% pot bet on the turn, making it less likely you're trying to get stacks in with a strong hand. So he probably views us as being weak, maybe 2 overcards, maybe a flush draw of our own, or maybe even a top pair that we don't want to play too strongly. So I would put him on the range for monsters. He still has all of his sets, and one of his flop marginal hands turned into a monster. If he had 9-9 pre-flop, or on the flop, if he had that under pair of 9s, the turn 9 gave him a monster now, a set of 9s. For marginal hands, any board pair and under pairs are still part of his marginal hands, and like I just said, one of those got promoted to a monster. And for draws and air, the second spade makes a backdoor flush draw possible, and the 9 could have given him a straight draw as well if he had 2 unders, or if he had a queen jack, or a king queen, king jack like you. It's a straight draw as well for him. And so I think, having said all this, monsters, marginal, and draws and air, I think he's heavily weighted towards marginal and draws or air, as I think a set would be check raising or donk leading the turn to build the pot for value and to protect against any draws that you might have. So we're on the river now. The river has 83 big blinds in the pot with 76 big blinds effective behind. It comes a jack of spades. So the final board is 10-3, deuce, 9 jack with 3 spades. I'll say that again. 10-3 deuce, 9 jack with 3 spades. And this is one of the jacks we were looking for, but this one unfortunately also completed the backdoor flush draw with 3 spades on the board. And it's terrible, but our opponent suddenly shoves into us. He donk shoves into us for the full 76 BBs, which is a little bit under pot here. And man, this is a crappy spot to be in. We've got the nut straight on a 3 flush board, and the opponent suddenly jams out of position after check calling the flop and the turn. At lower stakes, when guys are passive, then finally get aggro on the river, it's usually a nutted hand. That's kind of at the stakes that I play, 10NL and 25NL. That's definitely what I see. And because he did it on the 3rd spade, I've got to put him on a flush most likely. He could be bluffing. He could have a set, maybe hit that set of jacks on the river. He had the set of 9s on the turn that he decided to slow play. He could have had a lot of broadways with 2 spades and top pair, or 2 overcards even, that he could be bluffing as well. So I've got to fold here, as I don't see any of his draws or air hands playing this way. If he completely whiffed his draws, I don't think he would shove this river like this. And marginal hands would just check call the final street. He's played it passively up to this point. I think he would just check call if he had 2 pair or just a top pair or something like that. And he could be shoving with the same hand as you, but I think he's only shoving with made hands here. So you're beat by too many more flushes than you chop straights with. So it's a fold in my opinion. It's a gut-wrenching fold, but you've just got to do it here. And this is what LTU Maximus had to say about the hand afterwards. I really didn't expect him to play like that from out of position, and especially with ace-3 of spades. I put him on a small pair like deuces through 9s, might be a suited connector, 6-7, 7-8, 8-9, but very unlikely. His 3-bet percentage is so low, so he might be slow playing jacks, queens, ace king, ace queen. I think I had to call because I put him on a set or a lower straight. What would be your opinion? Best regards, LTU Maximus. Yeah, so I had originally told LTU Maximus that the turn c-bet was good, but now that I've put more thought into it, I would have liked more equity with a heart or a king or a queen, not an undercard, because this won't scare him into folding, as that's what our turn c-bet is intended to do. Or making it bigger, like bumping the percentage up to 70 to 75% pot, would have been more convincing. I also told him that I would call the river, but now that I've used Andrew's hand-reading thought process, I think he only shoves with made hands, and he's got more flushes than straights in it. So now I think it's a fold, and I would ditch the hand here. It'd be painful, but I would. And thanks again, LTU Maximus, for this hand. And the next hand history is from our good buddy Dom, and it's from an MTT. The previous one was from a 10 NL cash game. He says, "Hello, Sky. Here's an interesting hand. It's a multi-way hand. If you get a chance, let me know your thoughts, Dom." Alrighty, well, thank you very much for sending the hand in, Dom. Everybody can follow along in the show notes. You can read it out there. It's not a player, but a text-written hand history for this hand. So pre-flop, we're at the 25-50 level with 70 BBs effective, and we are covered by our opponents. 9 players are dealt into the hand. We have 88 or 8-8 in the middle position. It's folded to us, and we open to 2.5 BBs. The next player calls, then it folds to the blinds, and they both call. So we're heading to the flop in a 4-way pot versus 2 blinds and 1 player in position on us. So the blinds have very wide open ranges, as they were getting great odds on their calls, and all I can really remove from their ranges is queens or better. The first caller with position on us has a wide range as well, maybe 9s through deuces, suited aces, lots of broadways, and suited and connected hands. He could just be playing his position at this point. Really here, with the pocket 8s, we're just hoping to hit a set because we can't stand much pressure on most flops versus 3 other players. So the flop has 10 big blinds in it, and it comes 9-4-4 rainbow. Remember, we've got the 8-8 for an underpair. The small blind checks, then the big blind puts out a measly min bet for 1/10 of the pot. We raise it up half pot, and the guy in position folds, but the 2 blinds call. And that's great. Our c-bet eliminated 1, and now we have position throughout the hand. Now that these 2 out of position guys called, what are they calling with? The min c-bet, or the min bet call by the big blind, feels like a marginal or a draw/air hand. So for these 2, I would kind of give them both kind of the same ranges here. For monsters, they could have trip 4s or a full house 9s or over. Those are the 2 monsters that are possible in their range. For marginal hands, they do have overpairs like 10s or jacks, and underpairs, and maybe some top pair hands. I really doubt deuces or 3s would stay in at this point on a 9-4-4 board. Just not much value there for them. As far as draws and air go, possibly 2 overs like King Jack or Ace Queen would call 1 street, and it'd have to be suited for a backdoor flush draw, but on a paired board, that seems like a bad call out of position. I would probably ditch those. Maybe call the 1 street, but if I did not see any improvement on the turn, I would ditch the Ace Queen, King Jack, any of the 2 overs like that, So we're 3-way to the turn with 25 BBs in the pot. We've got 62 BBs behind, so there's plenty of room for action still. The turn comes of 4 of hearts, so the board reads 9-4-4-4 rainbow. So we've got the under full house. They both check to us, and we fire a healthy half-pot bet at about 12 big blinds. They both call. So wow, they both call on this trips board, trip 4s on the board. This means they both think their hands could be better than ours, or they're just pot controlling by playing aggressively or slow playing a hand, of course. The small blind check calls knowing that the big blind might raise, and the big blind called knowing that the small blind called and likes his hand. We could be up against quads, and one of them could also be slow playing the 9-9 for the nut full house. It's possible as well. So if we want to classify their hands, monsters, marginal, and draws and air, the monster hands that they could have at this point for check calling us on the turn are quads and better full houses, of course. Those are the only monsters. For some marginal hands, they could have underpairs that might stay in, thinking that if we don't have a 9 or an overpair, they might win with pocket 7s or 6s or 5s. They could consider that. So they're just trying to pot control and keeping the pot small. So those are marginal hands. And for draws and air, on this board, most draws or air would fold. You might get a station who check call with 2 overs hoping to hit, a 6-outer for a strong full house. So this is a small part of their ranges, the draws and air. And I think both are weighted towards full houses, and some of those full houses are better than ours. And on the river, we've got 62 BBs in this pot with only 50 BBs effective behind. It comes a deuce of spades, making the final board 9-4-4-4 deuce rainbow. No flushes or anything to worry about. Not that we'd be worried because we have a full house, but, no flushes are possible. This card doesn't help anybody. The deuce doesn't. And it doesn't change anything, and the two blinds check to us. What do we do here? Now, what I'm thinking is I'm just checking behind here. I think if we bet, we're only getting calls from better. Any 9, any 4, or an overpair will definitely call us. I doubt most 5s through 8s would call, as they were just pot controlling and hoping that we were bluffing with ace-king or something. They might still call, but most likely most of the calls are coming from hands that beat us. So I think that betting is mainly value owning ourselves, somebody just playing, slow playing the flop, turn, and the river, and I would just check behind here. We've got 2 streets of value already out of 2 players, so it's a pretty darn good sized pot. Now, that doesn't mean that just because a pot is big, we shouldn't try to build it, but we're beat by so many hands that could have been slow playing this whole time. I'm just checking behind here and making sure that I get to see that river. If somebody check shoves on me, I doubt I'd fold, but I just really wouldn't be happy with it. So I'm just checking behind here. In a subsequent email, Dom gave me the results. He said the small blind had 7-7 and the big blind had ace-queen. So he ended up winning the hand. That big blind stayed in with just 6 outs on the turn, which really wasn't that good, but great. He gave us some extra value with the terrible draw right there. So he went on to say that this hand was before we started the ranging study, so I may play this differently on the river now. Firstly, I don't know what the big blind's 1/10 of a pot donk bet multi-way is meant to be. When we get to the river, I think it's clear that draws and air are not there. Maybe a slow-played monster like a 4 or pocket 9s. I'm not putting aces or queens into their ranges, as I think they may raise pre-flop, but being 82-0 and 76-12 players, they may flat jacks through 10s. And I didn't know these stats ahead of time. 82-0 and 76-12, these guys are fishy stations. So, now seeing this, maybe that river value bet, a thin value bet, would have been a good idea, because these kinds of guys are going to call with all those under pairs that we beat. Maybe with those better pairs, we'd see a raise and be able to fold against such passive players. But, that's knowing this after the fact. At the time when I reviewed this hand, I think it's a check behind. And these look like marginal pairs. Oh, he continues on to say, these guys are fish. They may play in flat hands like jacks through 10s. These look like marginal pairs, deuces through 7s, in which I can get value from. I think I could have shoved my remaining 2,500 chips and or 50 big blinds and gotten value from this marginal range. I did get 2 streets of value from these 2 players though, and sometimes a 9 can be turned over by one of them for the higher full house, And yeah, I agree with you there, Dom. It's possible you could have been called by that 77 that the small blind had, especially seeing now that they're such fishy players. But at least you won. You won a good-sized pot, so good hand on you, Dom. Alrighty, our final question comes from Ingemar. The subject of the line is where the question comes from. May I get a copy of your HUD, please? Hello, Sky. You're awesome. So much good stuff for free. Hope to be a big winning player like you. Regards, Ingemar. Well, thank you so much for that Ingemar. For that email, Ingemar. Ha! So anyway, Ingemar actually purchased Poker Tracker 4 through my site and sent me a screenshot of the purchase confirmation. It took me a couple hours, but I sent Ingemar both my cash and MTT HUDs, and thank you so much for that support. I really do appreciate it, and for the email you sent me. For everyone else, if you're thinking about getting Poker Tracker 4, stop thinking and pull the frickin' trigger. Fire that poker improvement bullet. There's no better way to spend $99.99 in the poker world. That's $99.99 in the poker world. Just go to the show notes for this page and click on the Poker Tracker 4 banner. You can start with a free 30-day trial, then decide to purchase later. And if you send me your purchase confirmation screenshot, I'll send to you whichever HUD you want that I created and use daily. Challenge! Here's my challenge to you for this episode. If you don't already have a way to classify your ranges, your opponent's ranges, and to narrow down what your opponents have street by street, start using Andrew Brokos' Monster, Marginal, and Draw/Air classifications. Start by putting them on likely preflop hands, then as the hand progresses, narrow their range by deciding what hands would play the way they're playing. I'm finding it very useful, and I'm sure you will as well. Now it's your turn to take action and do something positive for your poker game.
Do it! Just do it! Make your dreams come true! Do it! Just do it! Do it!
Thank you so much for listening today. If you're not already there, head over to the show notes page for everything discussed today at smartpokerstudy.com/pod41. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter. And for doing that, I'll send you my Ultimate Poker Resource Guide for free. This is chock full of awesome goodies that you can use at the poker tables. And as a bonus, subscribers to the newsletter get a special piece of strategy content every week that you won't find anywhere else. Hit me with any feedback through the same show notes, or you can send an email to sky@smartpokerstudy.com, tweet me at smartpokerstudy, or post in the Facebook group at smartpokerstudy.com/discuss. And please send me your questions, your leaks, or ideas for podcast topics through all the channels just mentioned. Alrighty, poker people, be sure to come back for the next episode, number 42, where I help another listener plug one of his leaks. Word of mouth is the best advertising, and a recommendation from you to your friends would be most appreciated. If you enjoyed our time together and learned a little something, please share it with your buddy in the next cubicle. Until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.